Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I'll be walking you through the entire project structure from the backend, frontend and the infrastructure. So if you're looking to build SaaS using Django tenants and React, then this video is right for you. So let's get straight into it. The first thing I'm going to walk you through is the project structure of our application that is going to be the backend, the front end, as well as the infrastructure configuration. But just before that, in case you're joining us here for the first time, this is a series where I'm going to be teaching you a step-by-step process on how to build your SaaS using Django tenants and React. All the source files and resources for this project will be in the description. But if you do want a complete and production-ready source code for the project, then be sure to check the link into the description. Now, back into the project structure. As you can see, it has been structured into three main parts. The first is the backend, which will contain all the Django code. Then we also have the front end. This is where all our React code will go. We have the documentation here. This just includes the per episode step-by-step guides that I'm going to be putting all the slides. And then lastly, we also have the volumes. Now let's head over to the backend and explore the different types of applications that we are going to have in our Django backend. Now, as you can see, the backend right now, we have just a few apps. The first one is health. We also have the main Django project itself, that is Lendpoint. But I just want to walk you through the core applications that we are going to have for our project. Now, for the backend, we are going to have different types of application. That is going to be the domain-based application. If it's payment, you're going to have a dedicated app for payments. If it's billing, there's going to be a billing app. But the core applications that we really need to have for the project to work, the first one is the clients app. You can call it anything. You can name it tenants, you can name it clients, or anything that you want, but I'm going to go with tenants here. This is going to be the core application for Django tenants. This is what is going to hold the models for our tenants. It's required for Django tenants to have a dedicated app that is going to be storing the models for the tenants as well as the domain name. So that app is going to be called clients, so we're going to create that. The second one is going to be the accounts app, because we're going to need users for our application. So we're going to have an accounts app that is going to live in the public schema as well as the client's application. So the accounts app is just going to be primarily used for identification and authentication. Then we're going to have tenant application or tenant account application. This is what is going to contain all the business logic as well as tenant specific operations. And then lastly, we're going to create two apps today. That is going to be the tenant admin as well as the super admin. So those two applications are going to be used for our multiple admins that we're going to use, because here we have two types of users that we're going to have. We have super admins, that is like the platform staff, and the owner of the system is going to manage everything on board the clients, as well as a tenant admin that is going to be specifically for the tenant. So once we have covered that, let's go back to our project and see some of the configurations that we have for our project. Okay, so inside our backend folder, we have the Docker directory. This is going to contain all the configurations for Docker, such as the Docker file for development and another one for production. So the Docker file is the custom image for our web service. As you can see, it has all the user creation here. We do have the dependency that are going to be needed for running the web service. Now, once we have looked at the Docker file, we'll also need an env directory for dev and prod. And then this is the main project directory. We'll come back to that in a few. We have the logs, the media files, as well as the static files. And then templates, we're really not going to use this for our project since we're going to be using React. So the templates, all we have is just for the admin, for configuration of our super admin and the tenant admin, as we will see in our upcoming series. The front end, right now we just have one project here, but later we're going to have two projects. That is going to be for the tenants as well as for the public facing page. That is going to be like the marketing page. Then we just have a push but here that's just for pushing code to GitHub, just to automate stuff. So that is it for the outer layer of our backend directory. Now let's go inside and see other types of directory that we have. For a typical Django applications, we don't need this much setup. But since this is going to be a robust application, I have split up things here into different directory. As you can notice, I have the backend directory since we're going to be using a custom backend that is for PIN and password. So we have the backend directory here. We also have a common directory just for permissions, as well as a config directory. And then we also have the three different types of middleware. The first one is the request audit middleware. This is just going to audit the incoming requests and maybe just retrieve and store things such as the user's IP address as well as the user email, just to know who is accessing your system. And then we have the tenant API middleware. This is the most important middleware in our project because this is what is going to set up the correct schema for our project. It's going to intercept and extract the subdomain as well as the tenant for that specific request. And then lastly, we have the tenant not found middleware, which is just going to handle scenarios where the tenant that the user is trying to visit does not exist. So in that case, it's going to redirect that request to the main landing page. That is the tenant not found middleware. We'll cover this into details in our upcoming episodes. Now that is it for our project structure. Now let's go ahead and create the applications, the core applications that are going to be the base of the project. Now, to be able to create our project, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to cd into our backend project, because if you look at this one, this is our main project directory. So we have to cd inside backend. So that is the backend folder for Django, and then now we can start creating our application. So I'm just going to say, to create our account application, all we need to do is to just run python.manage py create our startup accounts, and we also need to create the tenant accounts as well. We also need to create the clients app that is going to store our tenant domains. The fourth app rather is going to be the super admin. Let's also create another one for client admin, because each and every tenant or each and every client is going to need an admin. So let's create another one for the client admin. Then one more app that we need here is indexing. Indexing, I'm going to let you know why we're creating indexing. Indexing is just going to be an app that is going to be used for fast queries, so you can store some things such as the email address and phone numbers, so that when you want to make a request, you don't have to loop through all the tenant schemas. So you can find such records in indexing. That is good when you're working with API requests. So in case you want to identify a user, you can easily find them inside the indexing app that is going to live in the public. And that is it. That is going to do it for the core applications for our project. Now the next thing that you're going to do is to actually register the projects inside our shared as well as our tenant app list. Let's clear this one and then go back to our Visual Studio Code. Inside our editor, we are going to head over to backend, and then the project called Lendpoint. Inside backends folder, inside settings, we need to come to the base.py, and now inside shared applications, we need to add the account app. That is important for authentication. And then we also have to add things such as the super admin as well as the tenant admin. So I'm going to add them under platform apps. So what I'm going to do here is just to add the first one that is going to be called the clients. Then we also need super admin. Okay, we also need super admin. Another one that we're going to need is the indexing that is going to be in public. So yeah, that should do it for the public apps that we just created. Then now let's go ahead and create and set the tenant app. So the tenants app here, the first one is the tenant accounts. We also have another one for client admin. Let's get client admin, and we also have to add accounts inside our tenant schema, tenant apps rather, tenant apps here. Some just before the tenant accounts, I'm going to add accounts here, just at the top. So let's add account. That's good, because this is for the authentication, then this is for the business logic. So that's going to do it for our settings configuration for the base.py. Now let's go ahead and set up our local.yaml file. That's the Docker file that we do have. So the Docker file is inside Docker. Inside backends, you have the Docker file, which we've already set up. Now the next thing you're going to do is to check on our Docker compose file. That is local.yaml file, because it's for local. Now here we have 4 different services. We have the database, we have Redis, we have web, we also have Celery and RabbitMQ. Then all these things live inside the Lendpoint network. The volumes have also been defined at the bottom over here. Volumes are for persistent data, such as the database, the Redis data, as well as all the media and static data. So we really need to have those volumes over there. So let's first look at the first one, that is going to be the database. We are using Postgres Alpine from the Docker registry. For the env file, we need to point to where our env file for development is. So you have to make sure that the path matches your project. So if it's backend, env.env.dev for our development. And then for the volumes here, we are using named volumes. For this case, it's Postgres data. Then it's inside var lib Postgres, then inside data. So, and also we have backups for the volume, that is going to be inside backups. And then we have the backend env app. Then we're just giving it a read only permission. We don't want it to write into it, so it's just going to be a read only. The ports are just the default ports for the Postgres database. Some health check as well as networks, and then the health check. And then the most important here is the web. So the web we are building from our custom image that we defined inside the Docker directory called dockerfile.dev, and then it's inside the backend folder. The command is using python.py run server, not unicorn, is going to be used for production. And then for the volume, we do have the backend, the media data that is going to be named, the static data, as well as our logs. So that is it for the web. We're just setting it to depend on a database and Redis. That means that web cannot start before the database and Redis services are healthy. And then we do have a health check here. That is why we added that health application in our project. And then finally we have Celery, RabbitMQ, and networks. So once that is done, we can go ahead and test our application by building it. So back to my project, I'm just going to step 1 directory back. So here I'm just going to step 1 directory back. And then now I can run my command, that is going to be docker compose. We want to use the local.yaml file, and then we want to just make the apps run in detached mode. Then let's also build them. If it's your first time running it, then you definitely need to build it. So you just use the build flag. So let's just start the project in detached mode. That might take a second. So I'm just going to fast forward it. So that is it for our services. It took a while to build, but it's fine. And here, as you can see, our web service is healthy. We only have a problem here with our RabbitMQ, but that is something that we're going to check on in our upcoming series. So today was just to show you on the project structure, walk you through how the project structure is going to look like. the applications, some of the dependencies that we're going to have. All of them are going to be available inside our project GitHub that I'm going to link to the description. So that is going to do it for today in our guide on the project structure for the Lendpoint loan management SaaS using Django and React. And as always, if you found this video useful, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and also leave a comment if you have any question or feedback. So that is it for today, and see you in the next episode.